Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
The board takes the unprecedented step, the first time in its history, of moving the clock hand 30 seconds closer to midnight. Today we move the clock a half minute closer to midnight. It is now 2.5 minutes to midnight.
Just moments ago, that doomsday clock moved forward 30 seconds. It now stands at 2.5 minutes before midnight. That's the closest to midnight, or the end of the world, as it's been in 64 years, showing that this panel has real concerns about what the future may hold. We're talking about a metaphor. We're not literally minutes from the end of the world.
Well, it is a metaphor, but we are literally minutes away from a nuclear exchange should someone press a button.
The doomsday clock ticked 30 seconds closer to midnight, in part, the experts say, because it's President Donald Trump's finger on the button. Prior to taking office, he called for the U.S. to strengthen and expand its nuclear capability. Does the election of a new president who might be more hawkish, is that grounds for moving the clock?
Those are the issues that the Science and Security Board take into consideration. We very rarely make a decision based on an individual.
The hands came the closest to midnight, 2 minutes away, in 1953, after the U.S. and the Soviet Union tested their first hydrogen bombs.
This seems to me to be more a day for a searching of the human soul, perhaps, than for any kind of scientific celebration.
We were the furthest from annihilation in 1991.
I'm moving the clock.
With 17 minutes to spare, after the signing of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty at the end of the Cold War. But they acknowledge they once got it wrong. The year of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, the clock moved back to 12 minutes to midnight.
That's the one that when we look back across our whole time series is the one that we'd say they didn't know all the information at that point.
If that clock ticks closer to midnight, are you going to lose any sleep?
No, I'm not going to lose any sleep. I don't think we're near an apocalypse.
Bill Gertz writes about national security for the Washington Times and is publishing a new book which details the continuing threat of nuclear weapons. He sees the doomsday clock as more of a political barometer.
In a lot of ways, the doomsday clock is being used by the liberal left to try to promote its agenda for nuclear disarmament, for greater efforts to control climate change and other elements.
Our goal isn't to create panic, but it is to say this is very serious and there's things that we can do. And if we can have that conversation, that would be very productive.
The shots rang out during the sacred evening prayers at the Quebec Islamic Cultural Center with 50 worshipers inside. One witness telling ABC News he heard someone shouting.
And then they opened shots. Two people standing next to me praying were killed.
6 were killed, more than a dozen injured, 5 critically. Police arresting this man, 27-year-old Alexander Bizanet, a student at a nearby university. Another man detained near the scene, later determined to be a witness and not a suspect. The timing hard to ignore. The attack after President Trump's immigration crackdown. The attack sending shockwaves through the community. The mosque's vice president breaking down in tears during a press conference with officials.
This was a group of innocents targeted for practicing their faith. Make no mistake, this was a terrorist attack.
The mosque in Quebec has been targeted before. Just this past summer, a pig's head was left on its doorstep during the holy month of Ramadan. President Donald Trump offering condolences to Prime Minister Trudeau, who had this message for the attacker.
The people who commit these acts mean to test our resolve and weaken our values. We will not close our minds. We will open our hearts.
United Nations experts have warned Saudi Arabia-led military coalition allies against war crimes in Yemen. The sanctions monitor said in a report to the Security Council that coalition allies, including the United States, the UK, and France, are obligated to respect international humanitarian law. The report comes after a local official reported a U.S. raid in central Yemen killed 30 suspected al-Qaeda militants and 10 civilians. However, the U.S. military said only 14 al-Qaeda members were killed, while 1 U.S. soldier died and 3 were injured.
At the end of week 1, as promised, President Donald Trump is easing into the advancement of U.S. interests as a global model on foreign policy. Today, President Trump held a press conference with UK Prime Minister Theresa May.
There are many issues on which the United Kingdom and the United States stand alongside one another, many issues on which we agree. And I think, as I said yesterday in my speech, that we are at a moment now when we can build an even stronger special relationship, which will be in the interests not just of the UK and the United States, but actually in the interests of the wider world as well.
President Trump has been very aggressive on his stance regarding immigration. Prime Minister May echoes Trump's position.
A future that sees us take back control of the things that matter to us. Things like our national borders and immigration policy and the way we decide and interpret our own laws. So that we are able to shape a better, more prosperous future for the working men and women of Britain.
In spite of this formation of excellent relations with the UK, our southern neighbor, Mexico, has been blindsided by President Trump's disgust with the cozy billion-dollar trade relations Mexico has enjoyed for the past 25 years. Market Watch reports after running a trade deficit with the U.S. from 1991 to 1994, Mexico moved to a surplus in 1995, and that's been the case ever since. As a result, U.S. imports from Mexico soared from $65 billion when the North American trade deal was passed to around $295 billion in 2016. However, the U.S. has been helped too, especially in border states such as Texas. Exports to Mexico have climbed from $68 billion in 1994 to an estimated $235 billion in 2016. As Trump pointed out, though, the U.S. is on track to run a trade deficit of close to $60 billion with Mexico in 2016, according to government data. That's about 12% of the nation's overall annual trade gap. In essence, this NAFTA transfer of wealth has benefited a small group of corrupt overlords, while the Bank of America launders cartel money and American industry is bled dry. After canceling a meeting with President Trump due to the outrage over Trump's insistence that the U.S. border be protected, Mexican President Peña Nieto reportedly had a phone conversation with President Trump following the cancellation.
I will say that we had a very good call. I have been very strong on Mexico. I have great respect for Mexico. But it was a very, very friendly call. I think you'll hear that from the president, and I think you'll hear that from the people of Mexico. And I look forward to, over the coming months, we'll be negotiating, and we'll see what happens. But I'm representing the people of the United States, and I'm going to represent them as somebody should represent them, not how they've been represented in the past, where we lose to every single country.
While populism and the excitement of righting all of the globalist wrongs done to the United States continue to push President Trump's approval ratings to 59% and beyond in the United States, Mexican President Peña Nieto's approval ratings are at a dismal 12% in Mexico. Nieto is regarded as yet another detached leader by the majority of Mexicans. And why not? A recent 20% increase in gas prices, a huge burden to the Mexican people who have broken their backs to earn higher wages and hopes of supporting an infrastructure that is desperately needed, a better power grid, better water treatment facilities, better plumbing, an end to the corruption and cartel violence that has terrorized Mexico for far too long, claiming the lives of at least 164,000 people between 2007 and 2014, a number that makes the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq look like a walk in the park. Where has all of the NAFTA surplus trade money gone? Apparently not into the pockets of the Mexican people.